Rain poured from the dark, alien sky, turning the narrow street into a river of filth. Neon lights flickered weakly, casting strange colors on the wet ground. The smell of rotting food and metal filled the air. People hurried past, their heads down, their boots splashing in shallow puddles. None of them looked at the small figure curled against the wall in the shadows. She sat with her knees pulled to her chest, her arms wrapped tightly around them. Her thin dress clung to her body, soaked through and stained. Her hair hung in heavy, tangled strands hiding most of her face. In her trembling hands, she held a broken metal cup. Her eyes stayed on the ground as if looking at anyone would bring trouble. A group of alien men passed, laughing loudly. One of them glanced at her, his lip curling in disgust. "Too dirty to touch," he said, spitting near her feet. The others laughed and kept walking. She didn't move, didn't speak. The words slid over her like cold rain. She had heard them too many times to react. Daniel was carrying a box of supplies back to his workshop when he saw her. He slowed down, his boots splashing in a puddle. The girl didn't notice him. Her small frame looked fragile, like a thin branch ready to snap. He had seen street scavengers before, but something about her made him stop. A drop of water slid down her face, mixing with the grime. Her shoulders shook, not just from the cold, but from exhaustion. She had been here for hours, maybe days. Daniel glanced around. People gave them both a wide berth, pretending she wasn't there. He heard whispers behind him. "Leave her. Not your problem." He set the box down and crouched in front of her. "Are you hungry?" he asked softly. She didn't answer. Her eyes flicked up for the briefest moment, pale and dull, like light trying to survive behind dirty glass, then quickly returned to the ground. Daniel reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small, wrapped bread roll. He placed it near her cup. She didn't touch it. "You can eat," he said, his voice calm. "It's yours." Still, she didn't move. Her fingers curled tighter around the cup. The rainwater inside it rippled with each tremble of her hands. A sudden loud voice broke the moment. A heavy-set alien merchant stopped nearby, glaring. "She's a stray," he said sharply to Daniel. "Filthy little thief. Give her food and she'll follow you home. Then she'll steal you blind." Daniel stood up, blocking the man's view of her. "Go mind your own business." The merchant sneered and moved on, muttering curses. Daniel crouched again, his voice lower. "Do you have somewhere to go?" Her head gave the faintest shake. "Then come with me," he said. "It's warmer inside." The girl's body stiffened. Her grip on the cup tightened until her knuckles turned white. Her feet shifted slightly, as if ready to run. Daniel saw the deep marks around her wrists, thin, raw scars too precise to be from accidents. They looked like she had been chained. The sight made his stomach twist. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said slowly. "I just don't want to leave you here in the cold." She didn't answer, but her breathing grew faster. A sharp clap of thunder echoed above them. She flinched violently, her whole body jerking. Daniel extended his hand, palm up. She stared at it, unsure. From the corner of his eye, Daniel noticed another group of passers-by stopping to watch. One of them smirked. "The humans picking up trash now?" Daniel ignored them, keeping his hand steady. "If you want to stay here, I'll walk away. If you come with me, you'll have food and a dry place to sleep. It's your choice." For a long time, she didn't move. Then, slowly, her fingers uncurled from the cup. She set it down, stood shakily, and kept her eyes on the ground. Daniel picked up his box with one arm and sheltered her under his coat with the other. She flinched at the contact, but didn't pull away. They walked through the wet streets together. The rain seemed colder now, but Daniel kept her close. He didn't notice the shadow watching from the mouth of another alley, a tall figure following them silently through the storm. Daniel unlocked the door to his small apartment above the workshop. The warm air inside smelled faintly of oil and metal from the machines below. He stepped aside, letting her enter first, but she stayed at the threshold, her eyes darting to every corner as if expecting danger. "It's safe?" he said gently. "No one here but me." She took a small step inside, her wet shoes leaving dark prints on the wooden floor. Her arms stayed wrapped around herself, her shoulders hunched as though she could make her body disappear. Daniel set the box of supplies down on the table and hung his coat. She didn't move further than the door, keeping her back close to it like she needed an escape route. The rain outside hit the windows harder. Daniel walked to the small bathroom and turned on the light. The sound of running water followed, warm steam beginning to drift into the hallway. He came back and gestured toward the bathroom. There's hot water, soap, and towels. You can clean up and get warm. Her eyes flicked to the open bathroom door, then back to him. She shook her head quickly. You've been in the rain all day, Daniel said softly. If you don't warm up, you'll get sick. Still, she didn't move. Daniel sighed, not wanting to push her too hard. I'll leave the door open. No one will bother you. He went to the kitchen and began unpacking the supplies, making noise so she could hear exactly where he was. Minutes passed. Then he heard soft footsteps. She appeared in the hallway, glancing at him cautiously before slipping into the bathroom. Daniel kept his back turned, giving her privacy. The sound of the water running changed. It grew harsher, colder. He frowned, realizing she hadn't touched the hot water handle. He knocked lightly on the wall. The other tap makes it warm, he called out. There was no answer, only the sound of water splashing. He stepped closer and saw her crouched by the basin, scrubbing at her skin with cold water. Her hands were red from the chill. Daniel slowly reached past her, turning the hot tap until steam began to rise. She jerked back as if the heat might burn her. It's okay, he said, holding his own hands under the flow. See? It's safe. She hesitated, then placed her fingers under the warm stream. Her eyes widened slightly, the tension in her shoulders loosening. Daniel poured a little soap into her hands and stepped back. He left her to it, but the image stayed with him, her silver blue skin slowly showing through the layers of grime. It shimmered faintly under the steam, revealing patterns like faint ripples of light. She had hidden beauty under all that dirt, and he wondered who had worked so hard to bury it. When she emerged, her wet hair was darker and cleaner, falling loosely around her face. Her skin looked different now, still thin and pale in places, but glowing faintly. She wore the same tattered dress, and Daniel noticed she was shivering again. He handed her a soft gray blanket. She took it without speaking, wrapping it tightly around herself. He set a plate on the table, simple bread with a slice of roasted meat. She stared at it like it was something rare and dangerous. It's for you, he said. Her hands moved slowly, picking up the bread. She took a small bite, chewing cautiously, then another, faster this time. In less than a minute, the bread was gone. Daniel poured her a cup of water. She drank it in small sips, her eyes never leaving the table. He wanted to ask her questions, but every time he opened his mouth, he saw the way her hands gripped the cup, tight, ready to run. So instead, he said nothing. A sudden knock on the door made her freeze. Her eyes widened in fear, her body curling in on itself. Daniel stepped between her and the door before opening it. It was only his neighbor, an older man who lived down the hall. "Storm's getting worse," the neighbor said. His eyes drifted to the girl wrapped in the blanket. A faint frown crossed his face. "Be careful who you bring in, Daniel. Some of them bring trouble." Daniel closed the door without replying. He didn't look back at her until he heard her breathing slow again. "You can stay here tonight," he told her. "Tomorrow, we'll figure out what you need." She nodded faintly but stayed near the table, as if she didn't dare move closer to the bed. Daniel sat in the chair across from her. The room was quiet except for the sound of rain on the windows. He studied her carefully. Beneath the dirt and fear, there was something else. A strange resilience. She was still here, still breathing, even after whatever had been done to her. He didn't know it yet, but that resilience would soon pull both of them into danger, neither had imagined. Morning light crept through the narrow window, casting pale lines across the floor. Daniel woke to the faint sound of movement. The girl was sitting at the table, the blanket still wrapped around her shoulders. She was staring at the cup in front of her, as if trying to decide whether to drink or not. He walked over quietly and set a small plate of food down, bread, a little fruit, and a boiled egg. "Eat," he said simply. She looked at him, her eyes still cautious but less empty than the night before. She reached for the bread first, taking small bites. Daniel sat across from her, leaning forward on his elbows. "What's your name?" he asked. Her chewing slowed. She shook her head once. "You don't have one?" Another small shake. He frowned. "Everyone has a name." "Not me," she said softly, her voice rough as if unused to speaking. "Numbers. Only numbers." Daniel felt a heavy knot in his chest. "Numbers?" She nodded. 468, that's what they called me. He leaned back, studying her. She didn't look like she was lying. The way she said it, flat, without emotion, made him believe it. In her world, being nameless wasn't strange. It was a punishment. You should have a real name, he said after a moment. She looked up, confused. A name is more than just something people call you. It's yours. No one can take it away unless you let them. She stared at him as if she couldn't understand why it mattered. Daniel thought for a moment. Then he said, Leora. Her head tilted slightly. What is that? It's a name. It means light. I think it suits you. She repeated it slowly, the syllables unfamiliar in her mouth. Li-ra. Her lips curved slightly just for a second before the expression vanished. Leora, he said again firmly. That's you now. She touched the edge of the blanket, thinking about the sound. It was strange, but not unpleasant. For the first time, she felt like something belonged to her. A sudden knock came at the door. She froze, her fingers gripping the blanket tightly. Daniel held up a hand to keep her calm and opened the door a crack. It was the same older neighbor from last night. His voice was low but sharp, words going around. You've taken in a stray. You know the rules, Daniel. Harboring one without clearance will get you fined. Or worse. Daniel's jaw tightened. She's just a guest. The neighbor gave him a long look. Be careful. People are watching. He stepped away, muttering something under his breath. When Daniel closed the door, Leora was standing now, her eyes wide. They'll take me, she whispered. No one's taking you, he said firmly. You don't understand, she said, her voice trembling. If they know I'm here, they'll come. They'll say you stole me, and then... She didn't finish the sentence. Daniel walked over and set a hand on the table. I'm not afraid of them. Her eyes searched his face, looking for any sign of doubt. She seemed to find none, but the fear in her shoulders didn't ease. He decided to distract her. I have work downstairs, he said. You can come if you want, or stay here and rest. After a moment, she nodded and followed him down the narrow steps to the workshop. The smell of oil and steel filled the air. Tools lined the walls of Nessus, and half-finished machines sat on tables. She walked slowly, her eyes moving over everything as if she had never seen such a place. Daniel started fixing a small engine, explaining the parts as he worked. She didn't reply, but she listened. Every so often, she touched a tool carefully, putting it back exactly where she found it. Hours passed in quiet work. For Daniel, it felt strangely peaceful to have her there. For Leora, it was the first time in years she wasn't being shouted at or ordered around. When the day faded, they returned upstairs. Daniel made a simple dinner and placed it on the table. Leora, he said, using her new name. She looked up sharply. It still felt strange to hear it, but a warmth spread in her chest. That's you now, he reminded her with a faint smile. She nodded slowly. Leora, she repeated again, this time with more certainty. Outside, the city's neon signs flickered to life. Somewhere in the distance, a voice called out and metal boots struck the ground in a steady rhythm. Neither of them noticed the shadow that lingered across the street, watching their window with unblinking eyes. The night was quiet until the sound of heavy boots broke the silence. Daniel was in the workshop finishing repairs on a generator when the front door above slammed open. The footsteps were too heavy to be his neighbor's and too many to be friendly. He dropped his tools and hurried upstairs. 2 alien men in dark armor stood in his living room. Rain dripped from their helmets, pooling on the floor. One of them was tall and broad, his black eyes scanning the room. The other had a scar running from his jaw to his ear. Leora was pressed into the corner, clutching the blanket like a shield. Her breathing was fast, eyes wide. The taller man's voice was deep and cold. We've come for the girl. Daniel moved between them and her. She's not going anywhere. She belongs to a work gang, the scarred one said. She escaped. Property like her must be returned. Daniel's jaw tightened. She's not property. She is by law, the tall one replied. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small data slate, holding it up. A picture of Leora appeared on the screen, dirty, thinner than she was now, and with a number under her image, 468, marked for labor until debt is paid. She ran before her time. Daniel glanced at Leora. Her eyes were locked on the floor, shame and fear mixing in her face. Leave, Daniel said. The scarred man stepped forward. We're being polite now. We could drag her out screaming. Is that what you want? Daniel's hand tightened around the wrench he had carried upstairs without thinking. You'll have to go through me. The two men stared at him for a moment. Then the taller one chuckled. "We'll give you time to think. But if she's still here when we return, you'll both regret it." They turned and walked out, their boots echoing in the hall. The door closed with a sharp click. Daniel looked at Leora. Her face was pale, her lips pressed tightly together. "Is it true?" he asked. She hesitated, then nodded slowly. "I worked in the pits, waste recycling. They took me when I was little, said my family owed a debt. I never saw them again." Daniel frowned. "And you escaped." "They hurt people who get too slow," she said in a low voice. "Some never come back from the tunnels. I ran when no one was looking." Her hands gripped the blanket tighter. "If they take me back, I won't come out again." Daniel thought of the scars on her wrists. He walked to the table and picked up her torn dress from the night before. In the seam, he found it, a small metallic tag barely visible. Stamped on it were the numbers 468. "They tracked you with this," he muttered. Leora's voice shook. "They don't stop. Even if you run far, they find you." Daniel set the tag down and met her eyes. "Then we make sure they don't find you again." Her brow furrowed. "How?" "We remove anything that links you to them, and we don't stay in one place too long." She stared at him as if she didn't believe he meant it. "You'd leave your home? For me?" Daniel didn't answer directly. "Get some rest. Tomorrow we'll start early." She didn't move from the corner that night. Even after the lights were off, Daniel heard her breathing, shallow and restless. Outside, the rain had stopped, but the streets carried the sound of voices and footsteps. Somewhere in the distance, a metallic clang echoed through the night, a reminder that the city never truly slept. Far down the road, under a broken street lamp, the two armored men stood in the shadows, talking quietly. The scarred one tapped his comm device, his voice low and certain. "She's there. The human won't give her up. We'll take them both next time." The storm rolled in again before dawn, wind rattling the shutters. Daniel was already awake, packing tools into a canvas bag. Leora sat on the floor by the table, knees pulled close, watching him without a word. "We need to be gone before they come back," he said, tightening the strap on the bag. "Once the market opens, the streets will be too crowded to move fast." Her fingers twisted the edge of the blanket. "If they catch me, they'll hurt you." "They'll have to catch me first." "That," Daniel replied, glancing at her. "And I'm not easy to catch." She stood slowly, her bare feet making no sound on the floor. "Where will we go?" "Out of the city. There are settlements past the ridge. People there don't care about debt numbers or labor contracts." Leora hesitated, looking at the door as if it might open any second. "I've never been outside the city walls." "Then today's the first time," Daniel said, slinging the bag over his shoulder. He handed her a worn coat, too big for her small frame. She slipped it on, the sleeves hanging past her hands. He pulled the hood up over her head, hiding her face. They left by the back stairs, stepping into a narrow alley where the rain fell in thin sheets. The air was sharp and cold. Daniel kept her close as they moved between buildings, avoiding main roads. The city's waking sounds echoed around them, clanging gates, shouting merchants, the hiss of steam from transport carts. Every time a heavy step came too close, Leora tensed, her body ready to bolt. Daniel led her through an abandoned warehouse, then out the other side into a district where the buildings were lower and older. Here, the streets were cracked and weeds grew in the gaps. Few people lived here now. They reached the edge of the district when Daniel heard it, the metallic stomp of armored boots behind them. He didn't look back, just grabbed Leora's hand and started running. She stumbled but kept up, her breath ragged. The boots came closer, voices shouting through the rain. Daniel pulled her into a side street, ducking behind a rusted metal gate. Through the gaps, he saw the two men from last night. The tall one scanned the street, while the scarred one checked a small tracking device in his palm. The blinking light on it pulsed faster when they turned toward Daniel Street. "They have a tracker," Daniel whispered. Leora's eyes went wide. "The tag," she breathed. "It's still with us." Daniel remembered. He'd left the metallic tag on the table. If they had been inside his apartment already, they could have synced it to her scent or heat signature. "We need to lose them now," he said. They ran again, cutting through a narrow tunnel that opened onto the freight yard. Massive cargo containers loomed like walls. Daniel led her between them, weaving through the maze until the sound of boots faded. He stopped beside a container with its door hanging open. Inside was an old transport bike covered in dust. He checked the fuel. Barely enough, but it would do. Leora climbed on behind him, gripping his coat. The engine roared to life, drawing a few startled looks from workers nearby. Daniel twisted the throttle and the bike shot forward, splashing through puddles and out of the yard. The city walls loomed ahead, high and dark against the storm clouds. The main gate was guarded, but Daniel aimed for a maintenance tunnel at the base. They reached it just as the sound of engines roared behind them. The armored men had found transport of their own. "Hold on," Daniel shouted. The bike tore into the tunnel, the narrow walls blurring past. Light flickered from the broken overhead strips. Behind them, the chase closed in, voices echoing, engines growling. The tunnel opened onto a muddy path beyond the city. Cold wind hit them, carrying the scent of wet grass and earth. Leora looked over her shoulder, her hood falling back. The men were still coming, splashing through the mud. Daniel swerved hard, sending water spraying, and took a hidden track that curved toward the ridge. Trees closed around them, branches whipping past. The sound of pursuit faded until only the wind and the bike's hum remained. When they finally stopped in a clearing, Leora slid off the bike, her legs shaking. She looked at Daniel, breathing hard. "You didn't have to do this," she said quietly. Daniel met her gaze. "Yes, I did." For the first time, she didn't look away. The clearing was quiet except for the soft patter of rain dripping from the trees. Daniel leaned the bike against a fallen log and scanned the area. The forest stretched in every direction, damp and shadowed, but it was cover. Leora stood nearby, her coat hanging heavy with water, eyes still darting as if she expected the armored men to appear at any moment. "They won't find us here tonight," Daniel said, lowering his voice. "But we can't stay long." Leora pulled the coat tighter. "If they catch you because of me," Daniel cut her off. "That's not happening." She lowered her gaze, her fingers twisting the edge of the fabric. "You don't know what they do to people like me. The work pits, they aren't just dangerous. People disappear. No one asks questions." Daniel stepped closer. "Then we make sure you never go back." They set up a small camp under the thickest part of the trees. Daniel pulled a heat pack from his bag and activated it, the faint glow casting warm light between them. Leora crouched beside it, holding her hands over the heat. Her skin, now clean, reflected the light in a faint silver-blue shimmer. Daniel noticed how thin her wrists still looked, the faint scars like pale bracelets. When he offered her a small packet of dried food, she took it with both hands, almost reverently. She ate slowly at first, then faster, as if afraid it would be taken away. As the forest settled into stillness, Daniel leaned back against the log. "Why did they mark you with a number? Was it just debt?" She stared at the ground for a long moment before answering. "My parents, they owed money to the council. They couldn't pay, so they gave me instead. I was 7. They said I'd work until the debt was cleared, but the debt never cleared. Every day they added more." Daniel felt a cold anger coil in his chest. "So they keep people forever. They break you so you stop thinking about leaving," she said quietly. "I only ran because someone told me to. She was my friend. She got caught. I didn't see her again." Daniel's hands tightened around the wrench he had pulled from his bag. "We're not letting them take you back." The wind shifted, carrying a faint sound, the hum of engines in the distance. Leora's head snapped up, eyes wide. Daniel doused the heat pack, plunging them into darkness. "Move," he whispered. They crouched low, slipping deeper into the trees. The hum grew louder, then faded, moving past on the other side of the ridge. Leora's breathing was fast, but she kept moving beside him. When they finally stopped, they were far from the clearing. The forest here opened into a shallow ravine with a narrow stream. Daniel filled their bottles while Leora crouched on the bank, her reflection rippling in the water. "Daniel," she said softly, "you could leave me here. You'd be safe." He looked at her sharply. "Safe isn't worth it if I have to walk away from you." She blinked as if no one had ever said such a thing to her before. They climbed the ridge, reaching a rocky outcrop that gave them a view of the valley below. In the distance, faint lights marked the edge of a small settlement. Smoke curled from chimneys, the glow of fires spilling from narrow windows. "That's where we're going," Daniel said. "Once we're there, you can disappear." Leora's voice was almost a whisper. "Disappear?" "Not like before," he clarified. "You'll have a place, Work if you want, rest if you need, but no one will own you. They descended toward the valley, but halfway down, movement in the trees made Daniel stop. A shadow shifted, then two more. The armored men stepped out, blocking the path. The tall one smiled coldly. You made it farther than I thought. Leora stepped back, but Daniel moved in front of her. His grip tightened on the wrench. You're not taking her, he said. The scarred one raised a shock baton, its blue light crackling in the rain. We'll take you too. Easier that way. Daniel didn't wait for them to move. He swung the wrench hard, knocking the baton from the scarred man's hand. The tall one lunged forward, but Daniel drove his shoulder into the man's chest, forcing him back into the mud. Run! Daniel shouted to Leora. She hesitated for a fraction of a second before sprinting toward the valley. Daniel blocked the path, swinging again. The scarred man caught his arm, twisting hard, but Daniel slammed his knee into the man's side. The tall one recovered, grabbing Daniel's coat and yanking him backward. Leora reached the tree line and stopped, looking back. Daniel was still fighting, 2 against 1. Her heart pounded as she saw one of them raise a weapon toward him. She grabbed a heavy branch from the ground and ran back, striking the scarred man across the shoulders. He stumbled forward, giving Daniel the opening to knock him down completely. The tall one cursed, realizing they were losing ground. Daniel caught Leora's wrist. Now we go. They ran together down the slope, the shouts of the men fading behind them. The settlement lights grew closer, the smell of wood smoke wrapping around them like a promise. The valley floor was soft with wet grass, the sound of their footsteps muffled as they neared the settlement's edge. Smoke drifted lazily from chimneys, and the faint glow of lanterns lit narrow paths between low wooden houses. Leora kept glancing over her shoulder, half expecting the armored men to appear from the darkness. Daniel kept her close, his eyes scanning every shadow. They reached a wooden gate, no higher than Daniel's chest. A single guard, wrapped in a thick coat muff, stepped forward, his lantern swinging. Travelers? He asked, his voice wary. Looking for shelter? Daniel said. We can pay. The guard's eyes moved to Leora, taking in her soaked coat, her thin frame, and the faint shimmer of her skin. His brows knit together. She's not local. Daniel's jaw tightened. Neither am I. Is that a problem? The guard studied them for a moment longer, then stepped aside. You'll find an inn down that path. Keep to yourselves and you'll have no trouble. Inside, the settlement was quiet, but alive. People moved slowly along the paths, nodding to one another. The smell of baked bread and burning wood filled the air. Leora walked close enough that her shoulder brushed Daniel's arm with each step. The inn was a squat building, with warm light spilling from its windows. Inside, the air was thick with heat from a stone fireplace. A woman behind the counter greeted them with a nod. Daniel asked for a room, and she handed him a key without asking questions. Upstairs, the room was small but warm, with a single bed and a worn wooden chair. Leora stood in the doorway, staring at the bed as if she didn't quite understand it was for her. You should rest, Daniel said, setting his bag down. She shook her head. You take it. I'll sleep on the floor. Daniel frowned. No, you're taking the bed. Her eyes flicked to his, uncertain. I've never had one. Not for me. Then this is your first? He said firmly. She hesitated, then sat on the edge of the bed, running her fingers over the rough blanket. For the first time since he'd met her, her shoulders lowered just a little, the constant tension easing. Downstairs, the sound of the door opening reached Daniel's ears. He crossed to the window and glanced outside. 2 shadows moved at the far end of the street. Even at a distance, he recognized the shape of the armored men. He shut the curtain and turned to Leora. We're not safe yet. Her hands tightened on the blanket. They followed us here. They're not giving up, Daniel said. But we have walls here, people around us. That's something. The rest of the night passed in uneasy silence. Daniel stayed in the chair, watching the door while Leora curled on the bed, drifting into a shallow sleep. The storm outside faded, replaced by the soft rustle of wind through the trees. Morning came with pale light slipping through the curtains. Daniel went downstairs to speak to the innkeeper. If anyone comes asking about us, say we left before dawn, he told her quietly. The woman's eyes narrowed. Trouble? The kind you don't want in your doorway, Daniel replied. He returned to the room to find Leora sitting up, her hair falling loosely around her face. She looked different in the daylight. still fragile but no longer hidden under dirt and fear. "What happens now?" she asked. "We stay low for a while," Daniel said. "Work here if we can. If they find us, we move again." She looked down at her hands. "I'm tired of running." Daniel crouched in front of her. "One day, you won't have to, but until then, we do what we must to keep you free." Her gaze met his, steady this time. "I'm not going back. Not alive." "You won't have to make that choice," Daniel promised. For several days, they stayed in the settlement. Daniel helped repair farm tools and small machines, earning enough for food. Leora helped in the bakery, her quiet nature surprising the woman who ran it. Slowly, she began to walk through the streets without her hood, learning faces and hearing her name spoken by others. But one evening, as the sun dipped low, the sound of heavy boots echoed again. Daniel saw them at the far end of the street, the tall one and the scarred one pushing through the crowd. He turned toward the bakery where Leora was helping close up. She saw his face and didn't need words. She slipped out the back, meeting him in the narrow alley. "They're here," Daniel said. She nodded once, no fear in her eyes now. "Then we finish it." They moved quickly, weaving through the alleys until they reached the edge of the settlement, where the forest began. The men followed, their steps loud in the quiet. When the scarred one lunged forward, Daniel met him head-on, driving him into the mud. Leora darted around the tall one, grabbing a fallen branch and striking hard at the back of his knees. He stumbled, and Daniel knocked him down with a blow from his wrench. The fight was brief and brutal. When it was over, the two men lay groaning in the mud, unable to stand. Daniel took the tracker from the scarred one's belt and smashed it against a rock. "They won't follow you anymore," he said, breathing hard. Leora stood over them, her eyes cold. "If they try, they won't walk away next time." They left the men behind and walked back toward the settlement together. That night, Leora slept in the bed without hesitation, her head resting against Daniel's shoulder. For the first time, she truly believed she had a place, not just in his home, but in his life.